Hello there. Today we're going to go over just how I cleared GR3-21 the first time. It's by far one of the gear raids that I enjoyed and despised simultaneously the most. It took something like, I don't know, 3 or 4 days of just hours of tryharding on GR3-21 multiple times. Because every time I would have a decent gear upgrade, new pieces, new awakenings, I would just kind of go back at it, try some more, and I tried a lot of different champions. You may see some in the roster right now that would obviously kind of solve my problem, like Hatsit. I did not have them at the time. My roster was essentially limited to what you see in the team and some people that wouldn't serve any purpose, like Hex. Um, so decided to just re-go over it because the amount of fine tuning and tweaking you can do on Gear Raid 3 is actually pretty huge. Um, it's it's for me the Gear Raid that has the most freedom in terms of how you can actually come up with a solution. Some of it remains a constant. You need those front units to deal with that first wave and the boss. You need a unit on the left, but how you deal with the entirety, the timings, the fine tuning of the gear, the basically everything else allows for a lot of wiggle room, right? We're running Cyrene for that extra cost regen. We're running Twinfiend for a Lord bonus for Dolores and Setram, as well as just use him to damage some of the right side waves. Luneria is there for obviously the Piercer bonus, but also just to temporize some of those right side units. And Absin is actually impressively good, in my opinion, on Gear Raid 3. If you have an Absin, it's... if let me rephrase that. If you have an Absin and you don't have any other good range fighters, like was the case for me at the time, then he's good. Obviously, it's Absin, but he does decent damage against flyers. Um, Liam is really there for the poison and the cycling of ults, which will in turn boost Idril's damage. So we place Liam first on the left side there, Idril on the right. We have Dolores in Invigoration, but we'll go over the gear at the end. But Invigoration is reasonable to get. By the time you're pushing 321, you should have already downed at least 219, which is probably the easiest of the gear raids to do. Cyrene, like I said, for the cost regen, pop an Idril ult as early as possible, because that basically the bottleneck is how often you can cycle Idril's ult. And you could try with a Laurel, you could try with a Hollow. Um, like I said, the timings and the units used will offer very different outcomes. And I got close many times with many different comps, but this is the one that finally worked for me. So right here, we're going to wait until the boss hits Elowyn before placing Maul. Otherwise, Maul will die. He can tank just barely one hit from the boss. Any more than that, and he just flat out dies. We're holding Elowyn ult right now to pop it the second those mobs show up to just damage them a little bit quicker, because this is one of the waves where if you don't kill them fast enough, your Idril will die, or possibly the Absin. As soon as we can, we're dropping Setram to assist with the damage. Maul is just dealing with this thing over there. Maul is the one in this case who is the most comfortable. Idril, just the usual, ulting to clear the sideways as we can and to continue DPSing the front lane. Where it gets, so here you're going to, you can hold off on the Wood Elf a little bit, but you're going to want to use that Wood Elf for healing Setram. Again, going back to Hollow, you can probably get Hollow working. You just need to time it differently and possibly have more rage regen on Idril. And this is the wave that got me killed on almost all of my tries. Up to this one again. There would always be one or two leaking through, but placing Twinfiend, he actually does a fairly decent amount of damage here. Coupled with Setram who's still sitting there, so that adds even more damage on that main unit right there. It outright takes him out, really. And then we're stuck with just those three. Now, this is where Luneria comes into play with her tanky gear. She freezes them twice. So that first amount of hits, they just stop for like half a second, and then they stop for another half a second. And we save the Elowyn ult as well, just to have that exact amount of damage to be able to pull it off. And then we're kind of set, because all that's left is dealing with the left wave, which again, Maul handles easily. That right side mob right there, and then the very last wave, which normally by the time it comes back, most of our units are also ready to be placed again, so we can kind of mess around with that, temporize again, and Idril should be back up. And yeah, basically once you clear that first wave on the right, you should be set, regardless of what comp you're running, because that's really for me at least, that's the most complicated one to time, because it's the second, it lines up exactly with when the boss is dying. If you have a good marksman, instead of using Liam, like for example, say you have Silas, you can get this done a lot easier. But again, if you have Silas, you're probably not watching a guide on this. You probably already cleared 321, or your Silas isn't bonded because you don't have Silas or Burna because you're like me and your roster sucks. But yeah, again, Twinfiend ult, dealing damage there. But by this point, Idril's ult is well and ready. Just drop Luneria for that. I don't think we even need it, but we do stop them a little bit, and then everything's dead. So we're gonna go over just a little bit of the gear after. I'm recording my voice after because the first time I messed up my mic and the volume was just too low. So I have to do this again, but I will pause this when we get towards the end of the gear because it will probably not line up timing-wise. But really the only person who needs crazy good gear is Idril. Like, Setram is running a nightmare set, which isn't all that great. Just has 3 substats on each. By this point, again, if you're doing 321, you should be able to get that reasonably. Maul does not need a soulbound set. The mobs were dying well before they even moved forward once, so that was unnecessary. And actually, if you have him in the less good set, he will ult twice per wave, which gives you even more Idril damage, which arguably is a lot better. Idril is the one that needs the very good gear. Almost, yeah, arguably the best gear on your account. If you have resources to ascend, insight into Inferno Roar, this is the time to use them. It's to clear through 21. That's what I did. I did not regret it a single second, because it got me through 21 with a kind of somewhat shoddy team, and it was worth it in the long run. I would definitely consider using those materials you have to get an early, basically just early in-game sets as soon as you can for good gear. Liam is just running, attack speed, rage regen, mana spring. He doesn't need a mana spring. You can just run attack speed. He doesn't really even need the rage regen. You can just run attack speed. Obviously, the more you get, the more he ults, but the difference is marginal. Twinfiend, I just ran a somewhat okay, again, Wisdom and Calamity, Tear of Twilight. Elowyn didn't have an artifact and was running some weird Asclepius setup. And I think we're down to what? Maybe Cyrene? Dolores? Yeah, Dolores, okay. Dolores is in somewhat mediocre and big. It's not terrible. It's not great. And then Luneria is just running some Guardian with HP to be able to take those hits. Because otherwise she will die sooner. And if she does die, you're not... If she dies before the second hit, you're losing that extra, 0.4 seconds where they stop and hit you. And that can make the difference. The main point of this video is really just to point out that 321 is the one that offers, right, again, the most wiggle room. Um, I, I'm fairly certain very few people have cleared it this specific way. The core of it remains, right? It's Idril, Dolores, rage boosted, with someone to help them on the center lane, someone on the left lane, and then whatever it is that you end up being able to do for the right lane. Greed could probably work. He will do a slow. He will do some damage. That may buy you enough time to kill everything. Maybe Mary, maybe Boreas, maybe there's a bunch of champions that could possibly work for it. It's really up to you to kind of test and see what could solve that right side problem for you. And yeah, that's it. So cheers. Have a nice one.